Hi students, in the model that we will be discussing today, you will be learning about the physical contamination and the allergen contamination in the food. The physical contaminants are one of the three contaminants occurring in the raw materials of the food that will be prepared. These are broadly the physical, the chemical and the biological. The physical contaminants include the stone, wood, personal items that are used by the food handler, or due to cultivation from the soil there could be contaminants, or due to pest infestation there could be the residues of the dead insects or their fecal matter, etc. These are some of the examples of the physical contamination. You will also be learning about the allergens that occur in the food and about the contamination of different type of food with possible allergens that could occur into the food, as well as how to avoid or how to inform the consumers about the presence of the allergen in the food. Labeling, as you people may be aware, as a consumer you do buy food outside and you have seen the labels which give different type of declarations. So in Western countries it's very often common to see that labeling regarding the allergens, and in our country too there are certain specific warnings which are issued in the labels itself, so that the consumer who is susceptible to have a reaction after consuming that particular food is aware and can avoid consuming that food. You would have learnt about the physical hazards and their health effect, allergens that are present in food as contaminants, and the health effects that can occur due to intake of physical hazards or the allergens. There are three types of hazards which can occur in the food due to the manufacturing process or packaging, or even during the transit or the retail. The physical hazards are most common and easily identifiable because they are visible to the naked eye and therefore most likely to be reported by the consumer as well as realized by the consumer. In view of their ease of detection, it is therefore not possible for the traders to hide or do willful adulteration beyond a point. They are found in the food therefore willfully or as a result of processing. For example, presence of iron filings in the tea leaves that was a problem sometime back in India occurred due to some problem in the manufacturing process. Let us now see the definition of a physical hazard that you can see in the figure. A physical hazard is an extraneous object or a foreign object which is present in the food item and that can cause illness or injury to a person who is consuming that food. These foreign objects include bone chips, metal flakes or fragments, injection needles, pieces of product packaging, glass, wood fragment, insects, filth, personal items and any other foreign matter which is not normally found in the food products. Sources of these contaminants are the raw material, badly maintained facilities and equipment, improper production procedures and poor employee practices. Processors must therefore determine the procedures to control these physical hazards by developing what we know as the hazard analysis at critical control points in the facility, as well as implement and monitor the food production with a view to exercise at the points where contamination can occur. The control of physical hazard therefore is very important. What are the methods? These methods include inspection of the raw material and having specifications, the vendor certification, metal detectors, use of X-ray technology to detect bones, etc., as well as effective pest control in the facility. Preventive equipment maintenance, proper sanitation procedures are additional aspects that have to be looked into. In addition, proper maintenance and calibration of the detection equipments are very vital. It is also important to handle the packaging material, proper shipment or transport, receiving and storage practices in an appropriate manner, as well as the packaging of the finished products in tamper-proof or tamper-evident packaging. It is important to educate the employees since a significant portion of the items that are reported in the fruit products sometime are personal items dropped by the employees, like jewelry mostly. It's also worth considering less obvious methods of prevention like protected light fixtures and controlling contact between pieces of machinery, because sometimes the bulbs or other parts of the equipments also do fall into the food while the food is being prepared or processed. In this table given in this PowerPoint, you will see the various categories of metals and non-biological and the biological, and this figure gives you a contamination of a canned product with a physical hazard. In order to control the presence of these physical hazards in the processed food, we follow, as I mentioned earlier, the HACCP practice. The HACCP certified will be seen in the packaged food, which many of you might have seen or noticed. It looks something like that as given in this figure. Now, how do you conduct the hazard analysis? The sources of physical hazard first of all must be identified, and the products have to be checked, as well as the raw material, the facility as a whole, the equipments, and one must have a fair knowledge about the employees' practices also. Then we will be able to control the physical hazards. Besides that, the plants must have the what we call as the good manufacturing practices in place. That includes the employee training, retraining, ingredient specifications, prerequisite programs, letters of guarantee, practices to identify and record the source of physical hazards, or what we call as the documentation, monitoring and documenting the controls and CCPs in the HACCP practice. Now, how do you conduct the hazard analysis? The sources of physical hazard first of all must be identified, and the products have to be checked, as well as the raw material, the facility as a whole, the equipments, and one must have a fair knowledge about the employees' practices also. Then we will be able to control the physical hazards. Besides that, the plants must have the what we call as the good manufacturing practices in place. That includes the employee training, retraining, ingredient specifications, prerequisite programs, letters of guarantee, practices to identify and record the source of physical hazards, or what we call as the documentation, monitoring and documenting the controls and CCPs in the HACCP practice. It can cause harmful damage to the digestive tract if not detected, like esophageal laceration, esophageal perforation, pharynx, stomach, intestine, and result in fistula also. It can affect the respiratory tract in the form of choking. For example, bone material present can choke one to death. Occlusion of the airway causing asphyxia and death, and children are more at greater risk, and there can be a partial collapse in them. There can be secondary infections, destruction of lung tissue from the retained material. The mouth and the teeth also can be damaged by the physical hazard in the form of lacerations and damage to the gum and teeth. Extremely very important for those who have poor dental health or teeth problem. The extremities or the hands while processing can be lacerated, and while eating also can have lacerations. Other effects include general effects like illnesses, complaints, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, fever, dizziness, and chest pain. The HACCP team must identify and list the physical hazards in all the following items. Number one is the ingredients, then the finished product, handling procedures, manufacturing operations, the storage, and the distribution. Other measures to ensure the food safety are handling food according to good manufacturing practices, that is, to avoid the inclusion of physical hazards such as jewelry or false fingernails or other products in the food items that are being manufactured by using proper personal practices. Eliminate the potential sources of physical hazard in the processing and the storage areas. For example, use of protective acrylic bulbs or lamps with shades or covering to sometimes prevent them from falling into the food processing area and breaking into it. Then installation of effective detection and elimination system to avoid the physical hazards, namely the metal detectors or magnet that will detect the metal fragments in the production line, while the filters or the screens will remove the foreign object at the receiving point. For all that, we must have an effective maintenance program for the equipments in facility to avoid the sources of physical hazards such as foreign material that can come out from the worn out or old equipments. Detecting and eliminating physical hazards during the production are dealt by using several methods that are available to detect the foreign bodies on food processing production line. That is, magnets can be used to attract, remove the metals from products, or use of metal detectors that can detect the metals in the food, and these should be set up in order to reject the products if metal contamination is detected. The equipment should be properly calibrated as well as maintained to ensure it is always accurate and doesn't produce false positives. The X-ray machines can be used to identify the hazards such as stones, bones, hard plastics, as well as metals. Next, we have to discuss about the allergen contamination. The allergen contaminations can occur when the food products are inadvertently contaminated with the allergenic proteins or with the foods that are containing allergens that can cause reaction, sometimes can be life-threatening in individuals having specific food allergies or intolerance towards these proteins. Some of the most common food allergens are the milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, wheat, soy, peanut, and tree nuts. Allergens are recognized as an important food safety issue. Therefore, precautions must be taken to ensure the food safety from allergen point of view also. This figure gives you the picture of some of the common allergy that are well known in the literature and well known among the consumers also. Now, there is another condition which is known as food intolerance. Food intolerance is somewhat different from the food allergy. Foods can cause variety of mild to moderate adverse reactions in some individuals, which is due to the result of presence of natural or added substances. These reactions are highly individualistic, and therefore they are related to an underlying condition which is aggravated by relatively high exposure to a particular food or a particular food ingredient. There is currently little information on the underlying causes and the factors that can influence the prevalence and the severity of food intolerance. As I mentioned just now, the food intolerance is different from food allergy. In the allergenic reaction, there is the IgE mediated immune reaction. IgE is an antibody which is produced in response specifically to a particular allergen or to a protein or a contaminant that is present in the food. What are the symptoms of this allergy, or how does a consumer know that it is because of eating a particular type of food? The time to manifest the allergenic responses varies between different individuals. It can happen immediately after consuming it or after several hours. These symptoms may be itching in and around the mouth, the hives, tightening of the throat, vomiting, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, sometimes wheezing, shortness of breath, reaction on face, hands, loss of consciousness, and even death, because these are all due to the antigen antibody reaction occurring in the body of the individual to various extent. The allergens from one food to other can be transferred as a result of what we call as cross contact during processing. Therefore, we have to schedule the processing runs, that is, scheduled runs of products containing allergenic ingredients in order to minimize the changeovers. The production areas for allergic, non-allergic products should be segregated. In case this is not possible, then the manufacturing of non-allergenic products should be processed before the ones with allergens are processed. Sanitation procedures must be scheduled after production run of these two types of foods. When the product design permits, add the allergenic ingredients as late as possible in the process and also in an exclusive manner. During the manufacture, traffic patterns of the raw material, packaging supplies, employees, all must be arranged in such a manner that there is limited contact between these various items or people during the manufacture of allergen containing products. If possible, have dedicated processing equipment, space, lines to prevent allergen cross contact. Whenever possible, make products with similar allergens on the same equipment. For production lines with crossover points, prevent allergenic foods from falling onto non-allergenic production lines. When processing lines are in close proximity, minimize the allergen risk by adding physical barriers to separate the allergenic and non-production lines. Dedicated tools, containers, vessels, utensils must be used for these two, and if required, color code must be used to identify allergenic ingredients and or the products. When dedicated utensils and equipments are not possible, then items must be sterilized or sanitized prior to using in the manufacture of non-allergenic products. Minimize the reuse of processing or cooking media such as water or oil. The oil which is used to prepare the processed foods with allergen should not be used for non-allergen. It will definitely have some contaminating material. Therefore, these should be avoided in the practice. The persons who are working in the different production lines again should take utmost care that they change their clothing as well as different gloves, etc., and use color codes for allergenic, non-allergenic products. When products containing allergens are being manufactured, then ensure that allergens are identified throughout the process, including the visually tagging, color coding at every point and every stage. Maintenance and engineering. Purchase and design the equipments using the sanitary design principles. Maintain the equipment to ensure systems are operating as designed. Design the traffic pattern and airflow in the production facility to prevent allergen cross contact. Ensure that equipment is positioned for easy access to clean as well as for inspection. Assure maintenance procedures for working on processing lines to eliminate the cross contact with the allergens and the non-allergen during the operation as well as during preventive maintenance. Determine the need to separate allergenic, non-allergenic production lines with physical barrier and separate employees and other methods to prevent cross contact. For production lines with crossover points, prevent allergenic foods from falling onto non-allergenic lines. Assess the risk of migration of allergenic dust to non-allergen product line during processing. These precautions will definitely prevent the cross-contamination. Let us discuss about the supplier management. Store allergenic ingredients or the product separately to prevent the cross contact. Protocols may include using clean and closed containers, designating separate storage area for allergens and non-allergenic ingredient and the products, and when segregated storage is not possible, use other methods for storing allergens or non-allergens, like storing milk and whey together, etc., because they all fall under the same category. And use documenting and cleanup procedures to remove the spills if they have occurred, particularly those foods with suspected allergens. And use dedicated pallets and bins. Using clearly designated staging areas for allergenic foods and ingredients is one more important thing in the supplier management. Storage of allergenic ingredients or the products separately to prevent the cross contact, and these protocols for storage will essentially be very similar to those which are seen in the suppliers management, that is using closed container designating separate storage areas for allergen, non-allergen ingredients as well as the product, and when storage is not possible, other methods of not storing the allergens over the non-allergen, etc., should be practiced. Raw material handling. Production includes ingredient dispensing, recipe makeup, mixing the raw material and ingredients, processing them, and then packaging the finished product. Critical allergen risks related to equipment and factory design include incorrect equipment selection, cross contact between material as well as between products produced on the same line. Therefore, good manufacturing practices must be followed by the manufacturer to eliminate or minimize these risks. When there is significant risk of cross contact from shared equipment, then the equipment must be capable of being cleaned effectively. Appropriate protocols must be there to verify and validate the cleaning regime. Air is one important aspect in the processing area. Implications of potential airborne contamination should be assessed. Dedicated air handling units with control pressure between areas or dust extraction system might be required for very dusty production areas. Accumulations of settled allergenic material on flat surfaces like machine guard, window sills should be cleaned up. The recipe verification is again very important. The first requirement to avoid allergen risk is to ensure the correct materials are used in the recipe. Systems therefore need to be designed to avoid the recipe mistakes. These systems will depend on the actual production facility and can include not only the verification of the recipe at the time of adding the material, but also proper software engineering design features should be used to avoid addition of wrong ingredients. An example would be a system which checks the barcode in the recipe against those of the raw material or ingredients when these are weighed, or the premix prevents the operator from continuing if they do not match. Then special case of an ingredients with these systems also need to be considered. Packaging and post-production controls. Incorrect packaging and or labeling is a major cause of allergen-related product recalls. Procedures for checking that the correct labels are applied to the product should be implemented very stringently. They should also be audited so that accurate information is provided to allergic consumers. Checks should be in place between processing and packaging area to ensure correct packaging is used. For example, use of automated label verification system. If packaging materials are stored in the processing area even for a short period, there is a potential for cross contact with allergenic materials. Production planning should include therefore the order in which different products are manufactured and packaged. Special attention must be paid when the production of bulk volumes take place at one location and the packaging of the finished product is taking place at another location. In such cases, the order of packaging must be designed in such a way so that the risk of cross contact by allergen is reduced, and these should also include the effective cleaning regimen or procedures in a routine manner. All this is possible if the staff are dedicated and they are also equipped with proper knowledge by training and retraining. Therefore, the facility should provide general training on allergen awareness and control of all employees at all levels of the company. They should have specific documented training program for the employee as dictated by their job responsibilities in their CV. In all the training, information should be included on the reasons of the protocols that are required to be followed, as well as the potential consequences which should be there if this particular plan is not followed. Identification and labeling of the ingredients is very important for the personnel, and they should be trained to identify allergenic ingredients by marker or by tag, by color code, isolate the allergens from non-allergenic ingredients, products in storage like for example egg, fish, peanut, milk, nuts like almond, hazelnut, walnut, cashew nut, pecan nut, Brazil nut, pistachios, soya, sesame, celery, mustard, sulfur dioxide and sulfite if they are used in the facility. The product label review and the label and the packaging. This PowerPoint shows what are the important points under the label review, label and packaging. Packaged foods are regulated in our country by the Food Safety Authority and by the FSSAI Act of 2006. It is required that product approval must be taken by the company. It is important to know that companies cannot arbitrarily add or may contain other precautionary labeling. The GMP procedure is essential for effective reduction of adverse reactions, and precautionary labeling should not be used in lieu of adherence to GMP. Therefore, proper label approval procedures must be there in the facility, and this is applicable for all the new products and any changes that occurs to the current products. The review of incoming labels prior to receipt must be there, checked for accuracy. Ensure that product specification and formulation changes are immediately reflected on the labels, and therefore approaches to highlight newly introduced allergen components must be considered. There must be good monitoring, documentation procedures and verification to see that the labels are correct, and any changes have occurred should be noticed and they should be documented. Discard all the outdated labels, packaging material in a timely manner so that they do not cause problem. Proper inventory control procedure should be implemented for all the packaging material, and proper packaging staging control procedures must also be implemented. The food manufacturers have recognized that in certain situations there is a risk of gross contamination of a food with nuts, like for example peanuts, which are not deliberately added to a food but it's due to a manufacturing problem. This risk can be conveyed to customers in advisory warning statements such as may contain nuts. More recently, this sort of advisory labeling has been extended to seeds such as sesame and other allergenic foods that can also trigger potentially fatal anaphylactic reactions. These include the egg, milk products, fish, shellfish, etc. This can be also facilitated by what is known as the ingredient labeling. Labeling is very important risk management and risk communication tool, and foods are known to cause allergenic hypersensitivity in a significant proportion. Ingredients and processing aids originating from a substance or product causing allergy or intolerances therefore should be declared on the pre-packed or on the non-pre-packed foods unless the derivatives are especially exempted by the country legislation. As regards the pre-packed foods, this information must be provided on the package or on a label attached thereto. For non-pre-packed food, country may adopt national measures containing the means through which the allergen information is to be made available and wherever appropriate, their form of expression and presentation. Labeling of these ingredients, processing aids, substances, product causing allergies or intolerances is obligatory when they are deliberately used in manufacture in preparations of food and they are still present in the finished product even in an alternate form. Therefore, the food operator will need to ascertain that allergen state is fully described in raw material, packaging, labeling, specifications, declaration, etc. And for instance, the generic terms like flavoring spices are not appropriate where these substances originate from allergenic sources, and according to European legislation, this is very strictly followed. Each supplier should be assessed and the application of allergen management practice in their operation and document that calls for assessment should be assessed. This can be achieved by means of questionnaire and where appropriate an audit. An allergen risk analysis from each supplier can be done to know exactly the risk in the products. Ensure that information from supplier is correctly recorded, including complete allergen status and intentionally present allergenic derivatives as well as potential cross contact. Lay down the procedures on how information received from supplier is handled, processed, acted upon. Any changes in the notification takes place with the supplier, this should be documented, and the newly identified allergen risk for ingredients that are being supplied should be properly notified and acted upon. When several alternative ingredients can be substituted in a product, example, alternative seasoning and raising agent that carries a particular ingredient, it may need to be purchased from different suppliers. The food operator needs to ascertain the impact of these allergenic status of the resulting products as well. So in conclusion, you have learned the different type of physical contaminants that could occur and ways and means by which these contaminants present in the finished products could be avoided, or even a retailer selling the raw materials, he could avoid the presence of the physical contamination. Of course, it's quite common to see the intended food adulterants that may be present, which are basically and mostly the physical contaminants that are occurring, say for example stones in the rice, etc. But at times there could be some process contaminants also coming from the machinery belt, like some trace elements, etc. can be occurring in the food which is being processed in a machinery, and after the food is processed also there could be chances of physical contamination taking place from the packaging material and other materials that are used to pack the food, like chemicals which are creeping into the food from the packaging material itself. Now the allergens in the food are a specific category of the contaminants, and these allergens, for example the peanut allergy, peanuts could be processed in the same place where some other material is being processed, so some traces of the nut could come into the other food which is intended for a general consumption. Now in this case, any government or a national body insists that there should be a precautionary labeling on the finished product. Similarly, if certain ingredients are intolerable for certain category of the people, then it should be mentioned in the label that this so and so product should not be consumed by this category of the people. So they are warned before and they should be knowing and aware. In this context, dissemination of information on this type of food labeling as well as information on the presence of food allergens should be brought to the notice of the consumers and the public, so that they know what they are putting in their mouth and what they are going to eat. In India, there is very little data available about the food allergens, and oftentimes one is not able to distinguish between food intolerance and between food allergens. Food allergens are immune based reactions, whereas the food intolerance is basically having a genetic element, like for example the lactose intolerance in the children, where basically the child is not able to digest a cow milk or a buffalo milk because the child lacks a particular gene which produces an enzyme to metabolize the sugar. So there is a genetic element involved and a metabolic disorder. But in the case of food allergy, there is an immune reaction, production of the IgE antibodies by the person who is consuming, and sometimes the allergic reaction could be very fatal, and therefore labeling is of utmost importance to avoid the allergens presence that are likely to occur in a particular food due to certain circumstances.